name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning, talk champion in the house, none other than the one and only Jonathan Small. Good morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
Doing fine, Stan. Good morning to you, too, as well.
Had a good weekend?
Had a very nice weekend. I mean, Sunday was the better day of the weekend. Just the weather pattern, how it looked, it just felt great to be outside yesterday, enjoying the sunshine and really just enjoying life. And had a little basketball excitement. I didn't really watch too many games, believe it or not, but I heard UConn won, obviously.
UConn men?
UConn men.
UConn men.
That's right, UConn men. So that's the biggest talk in Connecticut right now is the Huskies are on the verge of they're going to the Final Four.
Yeah, they're in the Final Four. I guess then I guess it becomes the finals.
Yeah, after the Final Four,
it
comes the championship.
Championship. Wow, so they made it to the Final Four. The women didn't make it.
They lost pretty convincingly to Ohio State, I believe.
Yeah.
But those things happen. I mean, the UConn women's basketball over the past 23 years, still they've been the best over that period of time. Maybe even 25 years. But it looks like South Carolina now is the new women's basketball. What do they call it? Dynasty, maybe. They're looking very impressive. They're undefeated, the South Carolina women's basketball team.
Wow, so they are becoming a legitimate dynasty now. Well, UConn women was a dynasty.
And I think they're still a dynasty. You know, you can't win it every single year, but just the track record of them going to the Final Fours. I think they won 11 tournament championships. I'm not sure, but I know it's at least been 10, and you can't do much better than that. I mean, if they won 11 tournament championships over that 23-year period, that is clearly a dynasty. So, but they still played hard this season. I think they lost one of their key players, the UConn women's, for most of the season. And the men obviously is looking like the UConn men is playing the best college basketball right now. But you don't know how that's going to circulate next week. So, but if you say the odds-on favorite of who's playing the best college men's basketball, it's definitely UConn. So, looking forward to that.
Now, college ball, someone was explaining to me that they liked college ball because you had more defense in college ball than you do in the NBA.
You do, particularly in this era, too. It used to be a time the NBA played better defense, but they've shifted more to offense. I mean, I don't know your history of liking basketball.
I'm not a basketball
You're not
fan.
I
if you start naming people other than like Dr. J.
Well, even Dr. J.
I wouldn't know.
But in Dr. J, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird era, that was one of the best styles of basketball. That early 80s, even throughout the whole 80s period. But Magic and Larry Bird, they claim kind of saved the NBA. Dr. J was like a legend, a showmanship player. But the style of basketball, if you're a Philadelphia fan, I would assume.
Well, yeah, by default, having been raised in Philly,
right,
until I, of course, moved here at 19. But, yeah, 76ers.
Right. Well, I don't know if you follow basketball when Larry Bird and Dr. J used to go at it in the Eastern Conference Finals. That 81 Eastern Conference Final Championship was an excellent championship.
Mm-hmm.
But the style of basketball, I guess they call that old school style.
Mm-hmm.
The new style is not playing defense, trying to score points, fancy dribbling, dunking. Mm-hmm. But it's not that competitive, physical, defensive style of basketball today. So you're right, college basketball is more defense orientated than the NBA.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say that I'm right. I mean, because I don't know. So, but someone had told me that.
Right.
And she's a referee, a basketball ref, and so she's all into the whole basketball, of course, and I have a good friend of mine who's a basketball junkie and played, and but I the defense as opposed to just scoring, I guess makes for a much more exciting game.
Well, the defense will tighten up when you get into the playoffs for the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
They do play a little bit more better defense. It's not so wide offense oriented. Like the NBA All-Star basketball game is going to clearly be no defense at all. Mm-hmm. Everybody's just trying to score. Some of the defensive players in the NBA, they do like to block shots, though. So they will strive to block a shot. Mm-hmm. But saw that physical bumping style. Plus, the NBA referees, they call fouls very ticky-tacky today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if you played playground basketball, but we used to play physical style, hit and bump and run, body contact. But
like hockey.
like hockey. I mean, that was our style of basketball when I was playing playground basketball. But the generation in this 2000 era, maybe a little bit before then, they don't believe in no body contact. You bump a little guy a little bit, there's gonna be a foul. So I can't adjust to this type of style of basketball. You can't even hardly put your body on somebody without calling a foul. But that's just how the styles have changed over the decades. Old school style was physical. Unless it's a legitimate foul. Now, if you really bang somebody down to the ground or really hit somebody where they can't move, then we obviously would call a foul there. But body contacts, we didn't call fouls in our style of playground ball. You can have physical contact.
So when they talk about in the paint, like, if you come into the, paint, you're going to get hurt, and all this other stuff, you hear folks talk about that.
Yeah, that too. I mean, obviously, you got some guys could be dirty players too now, hit you. I don't know if you remember, again, the basketball era, the Rick Mahorn, the Bad Boys era was very physical, Detroit Pistons style. Some teams were known for that. But basketball can be a physical game, though. Remember, you're not having no protection.
Right.
It's not easy when you go in that paint and hitting that, floor with no body protection. So you do got to be extremely careful too. I understand the referees making sure that the players are safe, and you got to be, always on guard for that. But, I'm looking forward to the college championship. I think UConn, it would be nice to see them winning it again.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And,
Absolutely.
Did you have any your pizza for this week? And you eat pizza? Or what?
I'm kind of pizzaed out. Now once Harry's closed, that was it for me.
Okay.
That was it. Although I am excited about going to the new
Harry's.
No, Wilson's.
Oh, Wilson's. Okay.
It's Pete's.
Pete's, that's the name of it?
Pete. Well, the guy that used to own Wilson's it's now Pete's. It's off in Rocky Hill.
Right. Okay.
Right. So I found out that that's the place. It's right off the exit where you get off. You go down. 81. Excuse me, 91 South. Where the exit is to take you to Channel 3.
Yes.
Instead of going over the highway, turn right. Down at the bottom of the hill. next to CV, across the street from CVS. That's what I was told. And there's Pete's.
Pete's, that's the name of it.
That's the guy who had the original Wilson pizza.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for the original Wilson pizza taste, from what I understand, Pete's is the place to go. So I still haven't been able to go there, but I'm looking forward to it.
And it sounds like you go back a long way with the Wilson pizza.
Yeah, I go back a long way. I went there, and it was not the same, and that was it for me.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the pizza chef, the restaurant is only as good as the people who cook the food.
Mm-hmm.
And if the people that cook the food stay there a long time and are managing the taste, once they leave,
right,
the name is great as the name may pull you in, but then what's the product?
Yes.
What's the product?
Well, like I told you, the last couple of times I went to Wilson Pizza, it tasted pretty fine to me. I mean, I had a special pizza. I give it a B grade. So
You said it was phenomenal.
it was phenomenal because I ordered special, pretty much every topping on it.
Well, that's not to say that the pizza there isn't good.
Good.
It's just that if you have something to compare it to,
Right.
so it's like sweet potato pie. Everybody swears they're the sweet potato pie slayer.
Yeah.
Until you bite into it, it's not like until it's not like the pie you're used to. So that don't mean it's not good. It means it just doesn't work for you.
Well, they say really Chicago style pizza and New York style is the best in the country. Although they are saying that I think Hartford ranked kind of in the top.
I don't know. Connecticut does,
Yeah.
and then particularly New Haven. New Haven is supposedly has the best pizza in the country. I'll be honest with you, I've never had pizza from New Haven.
Well, I tell you, I went to Pepe's one time and it tasted fine. I mean, I'm not a big thin crust pizza eater, but I had some pizza in Middletown, Connecticut, and the ones I tasted in Middletown actually tasted better than Pepe, but it was more thicker though. So again, maybe I like the thickness of the pizza, but the Pepe's was nice. But I would still say, one I tried in Middletown was real. I can't even remember where the place was at. Somebody took me there a couple of times, and they got good pizza in Middletown. These rankings that they classify, I mean, Hartford is now classified as the best in Connecticut for the pizza.
For pizza?
Yeah, and I don't know where
are they getting this magic pizza from?
Yeah, this survey they're talking about. I can't think of no place better.
Well, I guess the survey's only as good as the people who are asked questions, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe all the people they asked were from Hartford.
Hartford could be. I got to check that survey again. But I know the one I tasted in Middletown was really one of the best. And then Pepe's, I would say, like a close second. I haven't tasted any in this area that comes into that category with Middletown and Pepe's. So I don't know, again, what the survey consists of. But we'll see. Pizza's pizza.
Pizza.
But I haven't never tasted Chicago style pizza. I've tasted New York.
Is Uno's Chicago style?
Who's Uno?
The restaurant. There's a restaurant. I think Uno's chain I don't know. I think there was one on Burlington, but I think they closed. Not the chain, but that particular one.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. It is Monday, by the way, and when we do this program live, and the guest is overseas joining us today, so he's going to be joining us shortly. A little time differential thing going on, but he'll be joining us, just so folk are wondering why we're talking.
Yeah, talking, because usually we would be getting ready to start the
interview. We would have been into the guest by now.
And I'm really looking forward, because this is a legend in the entertainment industry. So hopefully we can straighten this little time.
Living legend.
Living legend in the entertainment industry.
Right. Well, so we'll flip the conversation around. We'll do the post conversation first, and then keep him. We'll keep him an hour or so.
Well, again, this article that was stated in the Connecticut Mirror that you had some commentaries about. You mentioned something about environmental racism or discrimination or neglect in the North End related towards the war. It was, I guess, related towards the MDC EPA issues with the homeowners and the businesses. Do you remember what you stated?
I do remember. I do remember. Some people don't remember what they say, so they have to walk around with attorneys.
Right. Right.
But I do remember. No, the question that was posed to me is, do you believe that this is racism? What's happening in the North End as it pertains to sewage? And my answer was that the sewage itself is not necessarily or inherently racist or racism, but the decisions as to where you work could easily be determined as such, because decisions are political. Sometimes they're practical, but if you have to start the project somewhere, you don't start it where, in the minds of many, it's needed most, which is in the African American community down on, in the North End, and it winds up being the last community, then you can't help but think that, well, maybe race has an issue. I mean, it's either race or lack of voting power, but something puts them at the bottom of the list and everyone else at the top. And if consistently people of brown complexion wind up being at the bottom of the list, that by definition would seem to me to be environmental racism, environmental injustice, or racism, however you want to frame it. The decisions are made based on people's classification. They may be black, they may be poor, they could be white and poor, but the people at the bottom of the social ladder, in the minds of those who make these decisions, always come last.
Well, I think that's a better definition, just the class of whoever's in that area, no matter what particular race. It just happens that in these areas you have mostly black and brown people.
Right.
But whoever the case may be, other than black and brown people, whoever's living in these areas are still subject to the same type of neglect.
Right. Because the problem is not looking at what color the people are. The problem is a problem. And it's a structural problem with the way that the sewage system is designed and made. Having said that, the problem needs to be fixed and resolved. Who gets what first and those are decisions that are made by people in power and folk who set those policies. If always you come last, then you have to ask yourself, what is the factor that's determining that you don't matter?
Well, I wonder if downtown, I wonder if there's a real separation of neighborhoods or communities or areas in the city where downtown is looked at more differently than the North End or if the West End. Some parts of the West End, I wouldn't even say all of the West End, is looked at any differently. The problem is the geographical makeup of an 18 square mile city is just too small to be divided.
It's one would think that it's too small to be divided, but you could divide a room. You stay on your side of the room, and I stay on my side of the room. You come on my side of the room, there's going to be a problem. So, the fact that it's small doesn't mean that there isn't division. That's in the heads of people. People create the division. People create the silos.
Well, let's just put a point blank. This operation is considered what, downtown South, where your studio is located?
We're in what they would refer to as downtown South. We're literally 2 blocks south,
right,
of Bushnell Park.
Bushnell Park, very close.
Right. I can walk 1 block, 2 blocks. I'm in Bushnell Park. 3 blocks, if you consider Bushnell Park a block, I am on Pearl Street. I am literally 5 blocks away from the Civic Center.
And you're close to Hartford Hospital, too.
I'm 3 blocks from I'm 3 blocks from Hartford Hospital. Right.
Well, do you feel any more of a sense of that you have better political representation in this area comparable to the North End, or
Well, my representation. I live in the 4th district.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get any better representation in the 4th district because the 4th district is the home of the DeBellas.
Right.
If you want to be in a district that's got some power, you need to be where the power is. So the chairman of the party is in the 4th district.
Right. So but is that translating? Do you see that individually beneficial for you, or just in general? Well, you say in general it is beneficial because you're in the 4th district.
Well, yeah, there's always a benefit. There are benefits and there's benefits, and there are, there's pros and cons no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my street gets swept once a week because the street sweeper has to go up my street to get somewhere else.
Right.
But I know there's plenty of streets in Hartford that don't get swept twice a year. They count themselves blessed and lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether my street has people on it that matter. There's a mix of individuals on our street. I can't explain why the street sweeper comes up and down my street once a week.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem to go up and down Park Street once a week, and I'm half a block from Park Street.
Right. Well, sometimes it's kind of easy to get distracted. I think this issue is real important, but don't get so sidetracked that this is the only major issue that people need. Obviously, it's a major issue if it's affecting you directly and your area directly. But you fix this problem, there's still some other issues that needs to be addressed and corrected too.
Well, there are always issues that need to be addressed and corrected. Because there are other issues doesn't mean that this issue is less important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if you're talking about the flooding, if you're talking about sewage backing up into people's houses,
mm-hmm.
if you're talking about sewer separation from clean water,
right?
All of these are different issues. Sometimes they converge, and you have a big problem,
right?
But the issue is still very, 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 very relevant and very, very important because people's houses are getting backed up with sewage,
right?
And that's a problem.
Well, the decision by the EPA regarding the responsibilities of MDC, I guess other agencies, whether it's the city of Hartford, is supposed to be finalized by the end of this month. So actually, hopefully next week we'll have some new information to see if MDC is being held responsible by the EPA.
Everybody's responsible.
Mm-hmm.
The city is responsible. The EPA is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
DEEP is responsible. And the MDC is responsible. Everyone shares a little piece of the blame.
Mm-hmm.
And so they all need to be locked in a room somewhere, sat down, and they not be allowed out of the room until they come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And then there needs to be oversight with intention to make sure that the solution is implemented. Because a solution not implemented is not a solution. It's not a fix.
Yeah.
The problem doesn't get fixed because people came up with a solution. The problem gets fixed because people applied the solution to the problem. And the problem no longer exists. This is not a new phenomenon. This has gone on for decades.
Yeah, well, the landfill used to be a major problem, and that got capped at some point.
Yes.
Through a lot of work by attorney Cynthia Jennings and other people. They really fought to have that landfill capped.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, I don't want to get into too many off-the-air commentaries that I've had with people related to this issue, because at some point you just want to get what's going to happen, who's going to do this. I know they've been having meetings over the past couple of weeks, and they plan more meetings, I guess.
Wow, yeah.
So meetings and
Folk
maybe
like to meet.
Yeah, but it might be even a public forum at some point. Because one thing I will say, this is a major project. What they're going to have to be doing with the clean water, whatever name they call it, the integrated separation.
The integrated sewer separation is a whole separate product, a whole separate issue. The two are not related. Though many times they're commingled or they're conflated or whatever. The sewer separation is 20 years in the making. It's been underway for a long time, and there are some things that can be resolved as a result of it. But keeping sewage out of people's basement is real clear.
Right.
And that can be accomplished, in my never to be humble opinion. But flooding is a lot bigger than all of us, because flooding comes from the water that comes from the sky, and we don't have any control over that. So how do you get rid of that water as best you can? We have a whole dike system and levee system around the city to keep the city from flooding. So it's not like people want places to flood. The problem is, if something happens, who's going to pay for it and who's going to fix it?
Right.
Who's going to own it? So, cars crash. We don't want them to crash, but now that they crash, how are we going to make people whole? That's all really anybody really, really wants, is to be made whole from issues. Not fix the impossible, but prevent what you can and compensate people when things go wrong.
Right. Well, let's just see how things work out. I still believe getting this final report is important. Letting people know, who legally now is responsible. You say it's the MDC, the City of Hartford, EPA, but you want some legal.
It doesn't really matter. I guess
you don't think it matters.
It matters who's responsible, but I don't want to get caught up in the weeds of who's responsible. I want it fixed. Yeah, but they've been talking about who's responsible for decades. So another report that says who's responsible doesn't matter unless the responsible party fixes it.
Well, I thought usually when something is you're legally at fault, then
you can be legally at fault, but that doesn't mean that you're going to do anything about it.
Okay. Okay.
So, there's lots of people at fault for lots of things right now, and they're not doing anything about it.
So you wouldn't even say, even when it's been determined that whoever is at legally fault, that doesn't translate that they're going to fix the problem. I mean, is that kind of what you're saying, or are you just saying that could be a problem too? I mean, let's say they find MDC at fault legally when the report is finalized by the end of this month. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that MDC now is going to take responsibilities and fix the problem.
I can't speak to that. I'm not the MDC. I'm not the MDC board. I can't speak to what they may or may not do.
Right.
If they're found to be at fault and they're directed to fix it, then so be it.
Right.
The city of Hartford right now is under a consent decree to hire police officers that reflect the community. They are nowhere near having reached the goals of the consent decree. That's totally on the city and the Hartford Police Department. They're not doing it. And there are some who want to dismiss the charge of the decree. There is no intentional effort to make that happen. So and they're under a judge's order. So I mean, just because someone is told they have to do something, don't mean nothing if they don't want to.
And is the city of Hartford saying that they can't find enough people of certain races to fill the position?
That would seemingly be the case.
Well, again, if you come to me and say I'm trying to hire people and I can't find anybody qualified, then whose fault is it now?
See, people like blame and fault. I don't care who's at blame. I don't care who's at fault. I want it fixed. See, I'm looking at the end result. What's the deliverable here? And the deliverable here is a fix. It would seem to me. But we take our break.
Okay, let me make sure this guest.
And we'll be right back. Okay. It's Morning Talk. Don't go anywhere. Every bad political decision is made by a politician elected to office. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, just remember this. There are people sitting with politicians in a back room making deals about your future, making policies about your children, making decisions about your neighborhood. To them, you are just a vote. You are not their cause. You are just a vote.
Elections have consequences, and if you don't vote, you are actually voting to keep these people in power to work against you. Now more than ever, you need to make your vote count. It's time to clear the air and vote for a mayor that is unbought, unbossed, trusted, and accountable to you, the constituent. My name is McCauley, and I am an independent thinker, and I approve this message. I'm asking you for your vote on Tuesday, September the 12th, 2023, in the Democratic Party primary election for mayor of the city of Hartford. For more information, visit McCauleyformayor.com. Have the courage to vote your conscience and vote for the name you trust and know. Vote J. Stan McCauley for mayor.
Welcome back. It's Morning Talk. We're live. Me and Talk champion Jonathan Small. Yeah.
Well, I'm still waiting for my guest. I mean, this may have to be pushed to next week.
We can push it next week.
If we can't get this thing straightened out.
He's coming, beaming into us from overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But these things happen. Like I say, looking forward to having an entertainer on this level schedule, and still want it to happen. But obviously, we got to get this thing straightened out within a reasonable period of time.
Well, we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
But
right. If he doesn't make it today, we'll make it happen for next week. Right.
Well, we really haven't had enough time of the past few weeks to even get into an in-depth conversation, me and you. Usually we have the guests on and we have post-conversation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we run out of time. So we're not going to run out of time right now. Happen to call.
Jonathan, hook me up. You have no idea. We go off there. Jonathan be here for an hour.
Right. But yeah, I mean, obviously, there's some things happening. Obviously, you're running for mayor this year. Big mayoral election. I'm actually working on booking a guest as a mayor for Urban City, America, which I'm really looking forward to that. I got to still work on a few things. But if that happens, I would love to have an in-depth conversation, because I think the cities are very similar in some areas, and what the mayor has done or trying to do. And that's really all that you can really do is, do your best effort.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do. I think that's all anyone expects. And there's always going to be people. There will always be people who disagree with you. That's a given. And such is life. You're not going to make everybody happy. And so if you go down the road of I'm going to make everybody happy, then most of the people will be miserable, because everyone ain't going to be happy.
But, I mean, your vision, if you had to really say you want to start with a particular area, because some people would say it's either the neighborhoods first and then downtown, or downtown, you got to have a downtown presence, and then you build your neighborhoods. Do you see it that way, as if you want to put a priority in a particular part of the city that you want to really empower and develop, or can you do both?
You can do both, but my first priority would be the youth.
The youth.
Right. Priority number one would be Hartford's youth. And everything needs to be centered around Hartford's young people. Everything. Every decision made in the city. Tax abatements, grand list, building opportunities, whether you're going to put a garage somewhere with 900 cars. Every decision has to be made considering Hartford's youth first, and how are they affected by every decision that's made. And that has to be the litmus test of our decisions. And then everything else, working outside of silos, communications, public safety, economic development, all of those things can be done all at the same time. And I think the bigger problem is that people do these things at the expense of other things. So downtown is developed at the expense of the neighborhoods. That's the problem. Or the neighborhoods are worked on at the expense of downtown. There's no reason why everything can't be mutually beneficial to all parties involved and everybody gets a piece of the pie. Everyone gets something to eat. All of the ships rise at the same time. We have the water rising. People's ships are rising with the water, but you have some ships that figure they have no right to rise at the rate we're rising, so they start shooting at them, sinking other people's ships. I think that type of management and that type of the end result, if that's the end result of decisions, then the management that causes those decisions are flawed, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So your priority is clearly the youth first. You putting the youth as the number one priority. I would assume that's part of your platform, that the youth is going to be the top from what you just stated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my 5-point plan, youth are number one. Unapologetically number one.
Right. And you're not talking about more grant monies for youth programs. You're talking about something a little bit beyond that.
It goes way beyond grant money for programs. We need less programs and more people involvement.
Right. Okay.
You know, the programs come because folk aren't involved, so you have to incentivize people's involvement. As though the kids don't know that you're being incentivized. Young people know that the adults are here because they're getting paid.
Right.
There's a little something different when the adults are there because they actually care for the kids, love the kids, and want the kids to do better. And there are a lot of those kinds of adults around. And there are a lot of those kinds of agencies around. So when we talk about children at the center, we're talking about the bus drivers, talking about the bodegas, talking about, the downtown businesses, we're talking about schools, we're talking about recreational programs, we're talking about re-envisioning what Parks and Recs is, so that Parks and Recs become centers that are strictly focused on the betterment of youth. You have some Parks and Recs centers that weren't even they don't open until late in the afternoon. The adults are inside, but the kids can't come in. That don't make no sense.
But see, the thing about, I would say, and I'm not running for mayor, so it doesn't really matter to some degree. If you're going to focus on the youth, you can't, and I'm not saying this is what you're looking towards doing, but if the youth have parents and households are having tremendous issues, yeah, you can focus on the youth. Okay, I'm going to make sure the youth gets addressed and figure out what they need. But if the parents where the youth are coming from live with, they're not in order, and they're going to affect the youth. Hold on, let me actually take this call.
Relax.
Well, it's an important call, so
you can take the call, John. Jonathan, take the call. He didn't have to get up off the set he's excited about the guests coming, but I'll teach him how to transition into the break. Why don't we go to a quick break? I'll take this call and then we'll be right back. That's how you do that. But it's okay. We are live. We're waiting for an important guest to join us. And he has to join us via Zoom. And so he needs to Zoom in. And once he Zooms in, then we can get him on the air because he can't get on the air with a phone call. So we'll wait and see here. All right, so let's take another break. In fact, let's listen to little Jay Hogarth. Stick and stay. We'll be right back.
pedophile school administrator or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they were elected to fight for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. Nowhere does this rule apply more than during an election for mayor. Choosing a candidate who is the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for the constituents to flip the script and vote for a mayor you can trust. My name is Jason McCauley. I am an independent thinker, and I approve this message. I'm asking you for your vote on Tuesday, September the 12th, 2023, in the Democratic Party primary election for mayor for the city of Hartford. I, like you, am an independent thinker. So let's sit down and talk about my path to victory and why my 5-point plan for Hartford will work. Stop listening to the uninformed evil interests that tell you I can't win. For more information, visit McCauleyformayor.com. Have the courage to vote your conscience. Vote for the name you trust and know. Vote McCauley for mayor.
My name's J. Stan McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, my friends, welcome back. It's Morning Talk. J. Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk. Jonathan Small is here joining us this morning. And we are joined now by our special guests. Always on Mondays, we have special guests joining us from somewhere around the world or sometimes locally. Generally, though, from somewhere around the world or around the country. And so we let Mr. Small have the pleasure and honor of introducing our next guest.
Well, good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. This morning we have a very special international British reggae legend. He has been involved in the music industry for decades, and he has a proven track record of versatile in many different areas of the music industry. The guest this morning on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show is a composer, record producer, musician, instrumentalist, no other than producer Dennis Bovell. Good morning, Dennis. How are you doing?
Good morning. Hi.
Hi, Dennis. It's our pleasure to
How are you all over there?
We're doing fine in you, Dennis, and I appreciate you making the sacrifice to have this interview take place. Dennis, before we get into our topics of our discussion, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly?
Well, I've been around a long time now and worked with a lot of different people around the world. People from England, the UK, from America, from Germany, France, Holland, Belgium, the Ivory Coast in West Africa, people like Alpha Blondie in the UK, man like Linton Kwesi Johnson, and the group that was formerly known as Radiohead and are now known as The Smile. And I've been working with people, you know, like David Hines from Steel Pulse and Brinsley Ford from Aswad, and the three of us together, we have a new group, and it's called Three the Hard Way, and we're about to launch our first single in about 2 months' time.
Mm-hmm. And I believe you was the record producer of Steel Pulse, the British reggae group, as far back as the 70s. Right. But Dennis, right. But don't they call it like lovers rock in Britain? It's not really labeled traditional reggae. Is that the case, or is it still a reggae?
Well, the thing is that a lot of people around the world need to understand is that reggae is a tree and it has a lot of branches. And some of those branches have different names,
Okay.
but they're all of the reggae tree.
Right.
Right? Reggae has an avenue called dub poetry. It also has a roots avenue, and it has a lovers rock avenue, which I've been, that's been my thing, because I was a believer that the females in the reggae world were just backing singers, and they weren't just backing singers. That we had to have somewhere in that world or on that tree, Aretha Franklin, or a Whitney Houston, or a Diana Ross, which would mean a featured lead singer. And reggae didn't have that in England anyway. In Jamaica, there was Marcia Griffiths and Judy Mowat and Rita Marley and people like that, Hortense Ellis. But in England, we had nearly none. So I started out writing and producing for young ladies who wanted to front the thing, who had, enough courage and certainly enough talent to sing up front as the lead singer. And I found a few females around in the last 40 years that did that. And most notably, Janet Kay, who, when she was 19, I gave her a song called Silly Games, and now the rest of that has been history.
Yeah, so you go back a long way, but I think the ironic thing about Steel Pulse was wasn't they classified as the first reggae group out of Britain, or was there other groups before?
No, wait a minute. Maybe to America, they were the first that went there and plowed the American field, but they certainly weren't the first, because before them came the Cimarrons, Express, Aswad, Matumbi. All these groups came before Steel Pulse. In fact, Steel Pulse were the winners of a talent competition in a place in England called Birmingham. And I was a judge there on this contest. And the first prize of whoever won the first prize was going to be afforded a day in the studio with me. And the winners were Steel Pulse. So I took them in the studio the next day and we cut Hands of Revolution. I also cut Naya Love and Burn Them with them. And we go back a long way, David Hines and the lads of Steel Pulse and myself. In fact, there was a time when Steel Pulse and Matumbi had the same management, the same agent. And until Steel Pulse moved on to Island Records, I was producing them, and I was in the studio with them, quite frequently. In fact, I was speaking to David Hines yesterday, and we're due to do something in Barbados in the end of May.
Mm-hmm. Now, when people think of Britain, I mean, obviously one of the first groups of a large international scale that comes to mind is the Beatles, and they kind of put, I don't know if they put England on the map, but certainly they was a huge success. But do the British artists actually have to come to the U.S. to really make it big, or can they really make it big in Britain?
Well, it depends on what you call big.
Mm-hmm.
Because by sheer populace mass, I guess the U.S. is bigger than the U.K. But by recording mass and releasing mass, the U.K. is huge, man. I mean, I remember a time when the Jackson 5 were known. They were unknown in America, but they were tremendously known in the U.K. And on the strength of that, they went back to America and made it bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's more listenership, there's more fan base, there's more population. So the U.S. has to be known as big, or bigger than the U.K. But then the U.K. is nearer to Europe can equal that. I mean, a lot of American artists, including Beyonce and Jay-Z and them kind, they come over to the UK to get closer to Europe. And they seem to think that the grass is greener there. And British acts think that the US is bigger because there's more chance of playing to more people. But on the other hand, as I said, you come to the UK, you're nearer to Europe. You got Germany, you got Holland, you got France, you got Belgium, you got all those countries that that are worth penetrating. And so the US artists like to come to Europe, and the European artists like to go to the US. As I said, it's a case of the grass being greener.
Greener, right. Well, one thing about the British artists, I mean, they seem to be very versatile. It's like you could take a British singer and they can sing any particular style of music, from reggae to pop to country western to R&B. It's just amazing that the versatility that they have. They're not like the U.S. in most cases. They kind of just stick with one particular style of music. If you're an R&B singer, you just kind of stick with R&B. If you're a pop singer, you might just stick with pop. But you could take a British...
because we believe in the UK that variety is the spice of life.
Right, exactly. Well, there's also been many U.S. artists that have actually moved to Britain, and they are very successful. I know Jeffrey Daniels of Shalimar is very popular in England.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
He is. I mean, even the great Marvin Gaye in his final days moved to the UK and started working from there. I think it's just as I said, the grass is greener. And you have to go to see for yourself whether it is or not. And a lot of UK groups believe that if you make it in America, you can make it anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
But, there are people who think, if I could make it in Germany, I'm big. If I could make it in France, I could make it in Italy. Anywhere you could make it, you're big, man.
You're big, right. Well, when you go to England now, when you're recording a sound in England, is the money just as lucrative in Britain as it is in the U.S., or is there a difference in the amount of revenue that you can make in Britain?
Man, money is in short supply everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You got to really go for it. I mean, I think a classic example is the British artist Joss Stone.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in England think that Joss is a U.S. product. And a lot of people in the U.S. think, no, she's from England. And she is from England, but she has an amazing talent. And she can be an example of someone who sings rock, pop, R&B, country, and reggae. In fact, in 2015, I did an album with Joss. The album was called Water for Your Soul, and it had a reggae side to it. I mean, Damian Marley was involved in that reggae side of that album, and a lot of reggae players from here in the UK. And when the album was hailed as the best-selling reggae of 2015 by Billboard, a lot of people got up in arms because they thought, she's not a reggae singer, but she had sung reggae and she made a reggae album, and she made it possible for people to say, you don't have to stay in the same bag all the time. If you feel like doing a country song, go ahead and do it. If you feel like doing a rock, but there's people who class different types of music with different racial stereotypes, and we try to break that barrier down in here in the UK.
Now, the UK, do you have certain parts of Britain that produces the music scene differently than other places? Like, here in the U.S., New York and Los Angeles is huge markets to go along with Atlanta. Where in Britain is the strong entertainment markets located?
I think the Midlands has been very productive of musicians coming from the UK. I mean, Steel Pulse are from the Midlands, and so are UB40.
Okay.
And groups like that. There's quite a lot of people from the Midlands. The Beat, the specials, um, even 10cc. You know that show that the amount of talent there is in the UK, and how versatile and diverse it is.
Mm. And then also, when I kind of got really highly interested in the British sound was like in the 80s when you had Loose Ends, you had Soul to Soul, Five Star. Mm-hmm. They was extremely popular and talented. Was they appreciated in England just as much as they were in the U.S.?
Well, I don't know how much they were appreciated in the U.S., but they were definitely appreciated in the U.K. All those groups, I mean, you didn't manage to mention Imagination. And Imagination were kind of the trailblazers of that style. I mean, there were groups here in the UK that were trying to make what they made of what's called R&B. I mean, Loose Ends were not tremendously popular in the UK, but they were in the US. I mean, Soul to Soul, now they were very popular in the UK, and then went on to be even more popular in the US. But there's a lot of trade going on. I mean, when you look at the Police, Sting and them boys, and how they played their brand of reggae, right? And that brings me to mind the region of Newcastle, which is where they're from. I mean, all over the north of the UK, there's a lot of trying musicians. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne, right? Black Sabbath and those boys, but that's in a different bag. I mean, I don't expect to hear them mashing it down in Brooklyn.
Right. Well, you had mentioned just recently you was working, or you had worked with singer George, Boy George.
Yes. In fact, the drummer of George's solo band, a kid called Richie Stevens, he used to be the drummer with Linton Kwesi Johnson and myself in the dub band, and he left us to go join George, and he was still there until he became George's producer. And at that point, when George was doing a solo album called "This Is What We Do," he called me in to do various things, play some bass, do some backing vocals. And I got also the chance to work with George Clinton, where we were doing a group with George Clinton, Boy George, and myself. We did some recording here in the UK, and I'm waiting for it to come out right now. But George wanted to tell me that he was now a fully fledged up member of Buddhism, and he'd become a Buddhist. And whilst he was saying that, he was doing a song called Greater Than War. Love is greater than war. And when I heard him say that, I said to Richard, I said, he needs a mantra on there going, bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than you, bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger, like that, right? I was joking, of course. George heard that and he went, yeah, that's what I need. And he made me do it on the record. And we went on tour. And, the album's called This Is What I Do.
Well, not also just in music. I mean, England is very popular in many other different areas. You had a television show called Desmond's, I believe from 89 to 94, which was very funny, very comical, but a very good, solid family show. Could you kind of explain a little bit about that show, if you can let people know?
Well, it was centered around the barbershop.
And
us folks love to get in the barbershop and talk, right? And discuss all kinds of things in the barbershop. You can be in a historical discussion. You can be in a domestic discussion. That's the way it is being in the barbershop. And so this was centered around the barbershop. And in fact, the man who played the lead, Norman Beaton, May his soul rest in peace. One night, I was in a Matumbi restaurant, and he came to me and he said, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Having a meal." He said, "Well, when we finish this meal, I want you to come to my house." And I was like, "What, is that an invitation or what?" He said, "Yeah, I want you to come to my house, man." But I was with a bunch of people. And I was like, "Well, I'm with this bunch of people here." And he said, "Bring them all to my house too. Come on." And, I had to go because Uncle Norman was very insistent. And when I went to his house, he put on the pilot of Desmond's. And it had been a new show. And he was just trying to get a public reaction. He wanted to know if it was funny or not. And in fact, with me, I had a driver who was Nigerian and had come to pick me up at the restaurant. And I said, "Look, I'm going to go to see Norman. So pick me over there." And there was me and a bunch of my family members. And we went over to Norman's house and the cab driver. I said, "Look, you stay with us, right? Because you're taking me home after this." And of course, there's the African character in there. And it was spot on. We laughed, and I laughed until my stomach hurt. And then Norman was like, "Yeah, I wanted to see if it was funny," because he was so close to it, and he'd been rehearsals and recording, and it wasn't funny anymore. The jokes weren't funny anymore to him. He'd been in it. But he wanted to see the reaction of ordinary people. So I was fortunate enough to be invited and escorted to his house to watch the pilot of that. And I said, "Norman, this is going to be a smash." And he's no longer with us, but it's a smash. I mean, it's repeated all over.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's an internationally smash too. It's popular. It was popular in the Caribbean. I believe it was portrayed, I guess, Desmond, that they were from Guyana, him and his wife, and then they settled into England. Right. And obviously the children and the rest of the cast was all from England, but it was a real international popular show as well to go along with just being popular in Great Britain. Stan, let me kind of bring you into this. You remember the Benny Hill show, if you remember?
Yes, of course.
The Benny Hill, okay. So you thought that was a pretty interesting show, a funny show?
Yeah, well, as a teenager, it was a pretty interesting show, but looking back on it, it was pretty stereotypical too. But I guess that's what made it funny.
Right. Stan, do you have any questions you want to ask our guests? Any commentary?
No, I'm enjoying the conversation and listening, and it's just always fascinating. And he's telling the story. I can see the different people he's talking to. Boy George, Clinton, and all these. So it's fascinating. There's so much that goes on behind the image that people see that they don't understand or know, or I guess they don't really care. They just want to hear the product. They want to hear the song. They want the smash hit. But there's a whole life behind this, and it's always fascinating to get a glimpse of that and share in that.
Right. Dennis, this show they call Top of the Pops, if that's the correct name that it went by, was a very popular show. And
it was. In fact, if you ever made it on Top of the Pops, you were considered to have made it.
Right. And I think at one point, Jeffrey Daniels did a dance on Top of the Pops, and it was so successful he had to be re-invited back again because people just loved to watch him dance.
Yeah, he was frequently on that thing.
Exactly. So were you ever on that show, particularly, or any group?
I was on that show a bunch of times with different artists. I was on that show with Dennis Brown on Money in the Pocket. And I was on that show with Matumbi, song called Point of View. Then I was on the show again with Edwin Collins. Now, Edwin Collins is a Scottish singer, and his biggest hit was "I Never Met a Girl Like You Before." And I was on with him with that. And, of course, I was on with Janet Kay and Silly Games. In fact, the Top of the Pops crew anytime they saw me, it's like, who you here with now? You know, because I was frequently on that show with artists from different genres.
Mm-hmm. Now, then this is, I guess, involving some of the U.S. Entertainers that moved to England. Was Tina Turner one of the first American artists that really settled in England, or was it Jimi Hendrix? I think it go back a long way when you started
Jimi Hendrix. It had to be Jimi.
His audio stand, I don't know if it froze.
Tina has been a queen in this part of the world forevermore. Jimi Hendrix came and was the king. I mean, when you had people like Eric Clapton, you know, playing guitar, and these English guitar players, you know, and then Hendrix came and tore the scene up. He raised the bar so high that even all this time after his death, I don't think many people have managed to jump that.
So would you say he's one of the best guitarists of all times? Jimi
Hendrix is the king of the guitar. He reinvented a way of playing the guitar that blew everyone's mind. Jeff Beck, the whole lot of the guitarist entourage that were out there, you know, saying they're guitar players. When Hendrix came on the scene, they had to keep quiet.
I think one time Jimi Hendrix actually set a guitar on fire, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was playing.
Yeah.
And the guitar was on fire. I think he was still playing the guitar, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he wasn't still. No,
he wasn't still playing.
The guitar that was on fire was on the floor, and it was giving feedback, and he had his foot on the tremolo arm, you know, what we call the whammy bar, and that was making the noise on top of what he was playing. That was accompanying what he was playing. But a lot of people wouldn't let him back into the arena because they were afraid of fire risk.
Oh, okay.
You know? And also, I credited Jimi Hendrix with the first person I heard dub on the record. I mean, now, okay, so people are going, yeah, King Tubby's and all these dub plates and reggae dub and echo here and scientist there and Prince Jammy's there. But if you listen to Jimi Hendrix's record, Are You Experienced, which came out in 1967, there's a track on there called Third Stone from the Sun. If you listen to the lashings of delay and echo, if that ain't dub, I don't know what is. In fact, it wasn't being called dub then, but if you look back on it and you think, where did I first hear all those echoes and that crazy? It was Jimi Hendrix, man.
Yeah, definitely he was a true legend with the guitar and his music style. Inventor, right. Also, American singer Gwen Dickey of Rolls Royce, she moved to England.
Yeah, she lived in England.
Well, I think she still lives in England, actually.
Yeah. Now her and Lee John are very famous for doing duets together. Lee John from Imagination. And Gwen Dickey, oh man, you know, we've adopted her.
I can tell, because see, she's known up here from being the lead singer of Rolls Royce. But I believe when she moved to England, Rolls Royce that kind of broke up. So she kind of went there as her own solo artist. And her style of music, man, her voice is really, really, really talented and passionate, you know, how she sings.
Yeah.
But people up here remember her from Rolls Royce. But obviously she has a new career down in England and everything.
Yeah, as a solo singer.
Exactly.
Now, what about J.K. and Jamiroquai?
Yeah. We adopted him for a while too.
Yeah, I like him. He's
and you know, Stevie Wonder's one of ours.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you know this person J.K. Stan, or you heard?
Well, I like Jamiroquai. I like their music. I play all of their songs and stuff. Their music. So, you know, you don't really hear much about him in the United States. But he's very big in Britain and in Europe.
In Europe, yeah, he's humongous, man, large.
Dennis, didn't you did some composer for like a movie or a film? You've also worked on that level as well.
Yeah, I composed music for the film Babylon, which was just released in the U.S. after some 39 years of the U.S. refusing to release that album and that movie. Sorry, because in 1980, when the movie was made, the U.S. said no, we're not going to show that, and they didn't show it until 2015 or 20 something around there when a U.S. film house acquired it and released it, and that was the first time it was released in the U.S. And a psychiatrist analyzed it and said, you know why? Because there was black on white violence, and the U.S. didn't like to show black people being violent towards white people, but it was okay to show white people being violent against black people or white people killing black people. But if you had a black guy who would dare to step up or stand up to a white person, that was not allowed in the film world.
Exactly. So what do you enjoy doing, or is it all about the same level? I mean, do you like writing as a composer, the producer, the singing? Do you like one a little bit more than the other, or is it about the same balance?
No, they all excite me. I mean, you know, whether I'm doing one or the other, at the time when I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I get fully into it and like to contribute 100%, you know. So whether I'm doing a bit of acting or composing or playing or whatever, I like to put my whole heart into it. And I enjoy it all. In fact, recently when Steve McQueen did his Small Acts series, 5 films, in one of the films he invited me to write some music. And I discovered that those 5 films was actually dedicated to a song that I'd been involved with, City Games. And he invited me onto the set. And I wanted to play a part by a Bayesian bus conductor because it was amusing that my dad had come to London from Barbados in the 50s to be a bus conductor. And I thought I'd want to play that part just for a laugh, you know. And he said, no, I've got a bigger part than that for you. And I thought, oh my God, what did I ask for? And then he gave me the part of the neighbor upstairs of the people who were keeping the party. And then I was in the party, and the party was centered around my song. And it was a hair-raising event because there I was in the midst of all these young teenagers singing my song. And then at the end of it, he said, well, let me introduce you guys to Dennis Bovell. And then there was silence in the room, you know, because they didn't know that I was in the room and they'd be singing my song.
And like I say, you were a member of this group, Matumbo. That's how you kind of got... Matumbi, okay. Matumbi. So you were one of the lead singers in that group, or one of the singers?
Well, I was one of the singers, and I was also the guitar player and one of the main composers of the band. You know, we've been famously exposed to America by Stevie Wonder had a radio show in L.A., and he played some of our music on that show, and people became interested in what we were like, you know.
And that was like a reggae style of music that you were...
Oh, yeah. The song was called Point of View. So we were signed to EMI.
Okay. So you do have some big major music labels in Britain, too, as well, when people think of the music industry?
Yeah. Hey, EMI was one of the biggest, I mean, worldwide. They did like the Stones, the Beatles, Duran Duran. I mean, they even put out Tina Turner records and Diana Ross and people like that. You know, so they were considered to be the biggest record company in the world. So we were particularly interested when they, you know, voiced, you know, a need to sign a reggae band, and it was Matumbi. So we got the chance to work in Abbey Road, you know, we got the chance to rub shoulders with people like Tina Turner and what's his name, Lionel Richie, people like that, who were also signed to EMI Records.
Well, Dennis, unfortunately, due to time constraints of this segment, starting a little bit later, we're just about out of time. But definitely, I will have to reconsider bringing you back on for part 2. Maybe some collaborations with some artists that you are working with or that you know of. And
be a pleasure, man.
Be a pleasure. But if there's any last words that you would like to leave the audience before we end this segment, feel free to do so.
Well, I'm probably soon going to come through the U.S. with Still Pulse on the tour.
Okay.
So watch this space.
All right. We'll definitely keep an eye on that, Dennis. And look forward to collaborating with you in the very near future, Dennis. Okay.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right.
All right. Blessings, and thank you for taking time.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Peace.
Peace.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Right.
Great interview.
Yeah, well, we made it work, Stan. We like your bottom is start a little late. We still get this show. I don't know if he's still on the air, but definitely wanted to get this interview segment in. Letting people know I have a guest, and then things don't show up. And learning, I think we just kind of scratched the surface of learning about the British music impact and influence. I mean, I always want to really do a type of show talking about the British history, their role in music, because sometimes people just are not aware how successful, how talented the British entertainers consist of. And again, my era that I love really was Loose Ends and Soul to Soul. I mean, those are really right up at the top of my British best. One of my best British groups was those two in particular. But there's been so many others too. It's not just them alone.
Absolutely.
And everything. But Soul to Soul, man, that song Back to Life is still popular. It's like you play the song now, it is still like you didn't hear it far back as 1989 to do that. And some of them love to move to the U.S. too, I would think.
I didn't know that Back to Life, Soul to Soul was a British group.
Oh, yeah. Karen Wheeler, the former lead singer. Yeah, they're British.
I didn't know that. I'm very familiar with the song. I used to love the song.
I
had no idea they were British.
Oh, yeah. Definitely British. And then there's others, but those two in particular. Then, did you know that Tina Turner lived in England? I mean, she lived in England for a long period of time. I think she lives in another country now, but she lived in England for a long time. Like he mentioned, Jimi Hendrix lived in England. You don't really think of our entertainers really moving to England. Usually it's them, the British groups moving to the U.S.
Well, I think it's like he said, grass is green on the other side, but there's something about being able to get away from the space where you are so popular that you can't go anywhere or do anything. If you go someplace where there's people treat you a little bit differently,
right?
You go out of the country, and then the entertainment circle can be quite brutal in terms of how it's like a lot like the political circle. There's a lot of cutthroat.
I was just gonna say that, man. The
backstabbing.
Yeah. Well, really, I mean, when you're on top of your game and very successful, it makes it a little bit easier. But you got to be real careful with your record deals. You've heard of groups selling certain millions of copies of records and they end up broke, end up owing the record label. So these things people don't be aware of, or they're not aware of sometimes when you're signing these deals. But again, I know some people in the music industry. Ronnie Love or Ronnie Song, Yasha Parjona. Would you still love to bring some form of entertainment? I mean, you're doing what you're doing here with AccessTV.org network, but is it really possible that the music industry could really be big in Connecticut? The
music industry can be big anywhere that there's talent and folk get behind it. Most things are intentional.
Okay.
Most things are intentional, and they happen because it's a good time and a good place and a good space. And before long, There it is. A lot of heavy hitters in the industry live right here in Connecticut. Lots of them.
Right. Just that exposure sometime, getting people.
Well, this is not a place where that kind of stuff happens for whatever the reason is. But I mean, your question was, could it? Yes. The answer is always yes. If you have a let's make it happen attitude, anything can be done. So the problem most times is those around the let's make it happen attitude that figure since they can't get a cut, they can't get a piece, or they see you as a threat, they go out of their way to stop the forward move. So things don't happen. And when that becomes the status quo of how things advance, then people with talents and skills go elsewhere. And they wind up by just force of nature connecting with each other, and they create a center of opportunity, growth, and wonderfulness where they congregate. But that could actually congregate anywhere. So, you have to have people of like minds, and they have to be free to do what it is that they do.
Well, you mentioned earlier during the segment that you're going to focus on the youth as part of your 5 pinpoint plan. Now, you have WQTQ radio station located at, if it's still Weaver High School.
It is at Weaver.
It's still Weaver, okay. You think that radio station could ever get stronger?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Weaver actually is part of my 5-point plan. It has been. My 5-point plan isn't something new. The 5-point plan is still, it's always been my plan and vision for Hartford from 2019. And so Weaver is part of that.
Right.
WQTQ is part of that 5-point plan. Working outside of silos and communication, and the youth. So
excuse me. That radio station, I believe, is online, so you can listen to it online.
You listen to it online, like most radio stations. It's also a broadcast station. It's owned by the Hartford Public Schools. Actually, the city of Hartford, I think, owns the license.
So obviously, as the mayor, you could have an impact and influence on WQTQ to develop it a little bit, differently if it's needed.
The technical answer to your question is yes.
Okay, all right. That's what I know.
The mayor has a lot of influence on a lot of things in the city.
Right. And I think, you always had a vision that you kind of wanted to develop entertainment to some capacity. What you have done, obviously, with the Hartford Public Access Station, there's no doubt about it. But obviously another area would be music.
Music, film. Particularly educational entertainment products. There are a lot of different vehicles that could be developed and avenues that could be explored.
Well, what I was saying even before we took the commercial break, talking about the youth, and I mentioned that the adults are connected. I still see it as an issue that if you have a youth and the household where they're living at, parents, older brothers and sisters, or whoever is living in that household, if you're going to focus on the youth and you can't resolve the house problem, because I don't know if you remember in the movie Lean on Me, there was a segment in the show where the teenage girl was going to drop out of high school, and she had some problems at home. I think her mother actually had put her out, and Joe Clark, Morgan Freeman, and along with another staff member, they went to the home and they tried to figure out where the problem is coming from. And they was able to come up with some type of solution. The home life was very dismal.
And that was a movie. But go on.
But that happens in real life. There are homes where there are children living in homes that's dysfunctional. That's not in order. So who role is it now if you're going to say we're going to focus on the youth to figure out if the problem is coming from the home, how do you deal with that problem?
When I say that the number one priority is our youth, I mean that's a number one priority citywide.
Okay.
Not just for government. For everybody.
For everybody.
Everyone. Churches, synagogues, mosques, the bodega, the gas station, the bus driver, the fire department, police department, everybody. All right. The Aetnas, the travelers, everyone. All right. Bank of America, credit unions, everybody. Young people in this city have to become the number one priority, because it takes the whole city to make everything function. And people are waiting for a savior to come and just magic wand and make things work. There are plenty of households where the kids are the main breadwinner.
Right.
Bringing home money to their parents. So it's not like because you have parents that are dysfunctional, somehow the house can't run. So you can't just drop in and fix everybody's problem. I understand that those problems exist and there do need to be answers. But is that the role of government? To find an answer for that particular problem. Government has a role to play, but so does the community.
Right.
And so does the society around there. So the block has a contribution, can make a contribution to that. The other family members, the aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, all those people have a role to play. So it's not like because there's something going wrong at 77 Wadsworth Street, we now need government intervention. Because who's the government to say what you're doing has to be a particular way?
Yeah.
So the government can play a role in bringing together all of the assets and all of the people that can help and strengthen those community agencies that need to be leveraged, that can bring about the help. There are plenty of people in the community who have the skill set, the knowledge, the experience to do intervention. But these individuals aren't given the tools or the resources or the assets necessary to be effective.
Right.
So if you want to really be effective, you have to have, one, the political will to make it happen. And that political will has to be able to support those efforts with resource. And it's just a matter of realigning what we have. It's not like we don't have what we need. It's just not being effectively used.
Right.
And the proof that it's not being effectively used is because you still have the problems.
Right.
If it were effective, then the problems wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? We still have kids that can't read at the third grade level. We still have kids that are absent from school. We still have kids that aren't graduating. We still have dysfunctional interagency issues. We have dysfunctional inside the police department. There's a lot of problems. They don't get noised abroad because we accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative from the ears and eyes of the constituency, so as to pretend that these things aren't happening.
Well, two things. Definitely let me work on getting this mayor from another part of the country on, because I think there's some similarities of this city to Hartford, and what the mayor has been able to do, I think, is real informative to people out there, because the city gets a real bad rap. And sometimes that's the same image that people have of Hartford, that everything is negative, kids are doing this wrong, and all of these problems.
Everything is not negative.
No, but the perception. I'm not saying it's the reality.
Right, but that perception is that perception is intentional.
Yeah.
The perception exists because there are a group of individuals who want it to exist and persist. Such as our kids. When I say focusing on the kids, once again, if you would listen to some people, all crime in the city is because of the kids.
Oh, yeah.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
And nothing could be further from the truth. Okay, are there kids in trouble? Are there kids caught up in crime? Yeah, but there's a lot of adults caught up in crime too.
Exactly.
A lot of adults in criminal trouble. So to put it on the kids like the young people in Hartford are the problem. No, there are a certain group of young people who may be causing trouble. All right. But if the young people's troubles are connected to drugs, the young people don't have any drug connections. They don't have tunnels to get drugs into the country. They don't have airplanes that supply drugs. These are done by adults. So, I'm tired of the kids getting a bad rap. I'm tired of the kids yes, there need to be programs for our youth. But to suggest if there's no program for the youth are by default bad? Go out and do crime? It's a ridiculous notion.
Well, tiresome of the youth getting the bad rap, but also tiresome of the youth being the scapegoats.
Right, scapegoat. That's a better word.
It is.
Because that's what it's exactly what it is. The youth are the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was truth behind the notion, then there would be resources to help them. But there aren't.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? They're used to get federal dollars in, but then the federal dollars don't go to help them.
Well, that's a real problem. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, you're definitely going to stay connected with this issue. The one thing I will say, though, even if the problem is a small, minute problem, it has to be dealt with. And I know that's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. There was issues, probably still now, that you have a lot of youth stealing cars, chop shop. Well, I don't think there's a chop shop, but somebody's organizing certain things. They're going out of town, stealing cars and bringing them back into the city. A lot
of the cars that are stolen were stolen by youth.
Right.
See the difference?
Okay.
A lot of the cars that were stolen by youth. Mm. Not a lot of youth are stealing cars.
Exactly. That's a better way to describe it. But again, the dangers of that is, and I think just recently there was some car accident in New York involving a teenager driving without a license. Okay. Well, what I'm saying, excuse me, Stan, is the thing is, it's a real. I don't know all the facts behind this incident in New York with these 5.
I don't think they were stolen.
No, but
there wasn't a stolen car. It was just a kid driving a car, underage,
without a license.
Yeah, doing what kids do, and it turned out to be a horrible accident.
Okay, so that's different.
Kids driving underage with no license. Yeah. This is not new. The kids do this all. Kids. Where I grew up, we did all kinds of things. We used to drive down the country roads. We come to intersections. We'd do 50 miles an hour on the back road. You know what we did? Mm-hmm. We turned the lights off.
Yeah.
And if we didn't see lights, we knew there were no cars coming.
Right.
And then we blow through the intersection, and then turn the lights back. Kids do stupid things.
That's part of life. I agree.
That's right. It's part of life. Kids doing stupid things relative to kids doing criminal things are two different things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they should be confused.
Right.
So, the horrible, tragic accident of a kid, 16, driving. The kids in Connecticut, you're not supposed to have a child. No passengers in the car at 16 years old. You can't have passengers.
All right.
So kids pile in, kids drink, kids do things, they smoke, they experiment, they get involved in sexual activity. Mm-hmm. Kids do stuff.
Right.
All right. And to the degree that we want to help prevent kids getting into things, we need a community approach to those problems. Mm-hmm. Not a hands off and put it on government. Right. Not government hands off, put it on the church. Not the church hands off, put it on the parents. Mm-hmm. Let the parents put it off, put it on the school. School put it off, put it on granny. Everyone's shifting blame, which gets back to what you were talking about earlier with the MDC and the flooding.
Right.
We have a propensity and a tendency to want to blame somebody for the problem. Like if we know who to blame, the problem will stop. As opposed to what can we collectively do to alleviate the conditions that cause the problem. And if you have that kind of approach with an intention of getting the problem solved, things change. Mm. As opposed to identifying who's at fault.
Yeah, I understand that part. But if there's legal ramifications, though, I mean, and I know what you said before, that just because you're legally at fault doesn't mean that you're going to resolve or fix the problem neither. But usually you would hope to believe that
it's nice to believe in hope. That's hope. Hope keeps us alive.
Well, no. If I'm being sued until the judge tells me that I'm found guilty, I could say I'm not guilty. I don't want to pay for the damage.
And that's what's going to happen. Then you appeal.
Right, okay. You appeal.
You appeal and you appeal and you appeal and you keep appealing until finally you exhaust things. And by that time, how much time's gone by?
A lot of time has gone by to do that.
Right.
But
the people affected, nothing happens.
Nothing happens, yeah.
How many? Should we do another 40 years and make it 80 years?
Well, at one point, I was hearing that about the Chef O'Neal situation, that thing was going on for decades and
it's
decades.
Still going on, and is the problem been solved? In terms of education, integration, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is not about, I don't care. Look, I'm not interested. I love integration. I was the only minority in a school in my graduating class of 425.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only minority. So I'm real cool with integration.
Mm-hmm.
But the school isn't an integrator. The school is supposed to be where folks go to learn and be educated.
Right.
So to me, education is the first priority of schools. Everything else comes after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, Stan, I mean, I don't have no disagreement with your 5 pinpoint plan, putting the youth as the top priority. And I know, again, if you're running for mayor of Hartford, you got to be focused on Hartford, because if I mention about, well, we're trying to bring a major development project and the project can't come to Hartford, if it can go to Windsor, let's try to move forward. But then you'll come back and saying, well, that's not going to benefit Hartford. So,
well, my job will be to help benefit Hartford.
Right.
I love Windsor and Bloomfield. We work together where we can, always. But I'm not the mayor of Bloomfield.
Right.
I'm not the mayor of Windsor, and I'm not the mayor of the region.
Okay. So you got to focus on the city directly.
Hartford.
Yeah, you can't get caught up into.
Hartford.
Right. Well, maybe that's a bigger picture beyond just the local. Maybe that's like a statewide initiative, because
maybe a regional government type thing, and as goes Hartford, so goes the region. So Hartford has to rise.
You see that part, I used to think that way, but
what's that?
That so goes Hartford, so goes the rest of the region.
It does,
but I don't think West Hartford is falling apart because Hartford is falling apart. So I'm not sure that that's the case.
Ask West Hartford how they feel about giving us their tax dollars.
Well, they have a problem with that.
Okay, then.
But that doesn't mean that their city is falling apart because so goes Hartford.
Hartford is not falling apart.
Okay, but you saying so goes Hartford.
As goes Hartford, so goes the region.
Okay.
As Hartford is stable, the region is stable.
Right.
Otherwise, the region wouldn't be pitching in to help keep Hartford stabilized.
Right, okay.
So how are you going to stabilize Hartford? You're going to stabilize Hartford by making us whole as it relates to pilot? Or are you going to stabilize us by putting us in financial bondage, by bailing us out constantly, by removing the people's opportunities to make decisions in their financial decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be a ward of the state forever?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for some that makes the region stronger.
Right.
I mean, these are all valid discussions. So regionally speaking, okay, if all of your crackheads come to Hartford for help,
right.
If all of the homeless come to Hartford for help, if everybody that needs methadone come to Hartford for help,
mm-hmm.
So Hartford is essential to the region.
It is.
It's essential to the region.
Mm.
Right? The region's water operations are in Hartford. The region's sewage operation is in Hartford. The region's trash is in Hartford.
Right.
So Hartford can't just be a dumping ground for the suburbans, waste.
Waste, yeah. Yeah.
And emergency needs. Hartford is a legitimate community, and its communities have rights and standing, and they have a voice that very often is not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to change, and it can only change with intention.
But then again, you have people like Bridget Prince and attorney Cynthia Jennings who are fighting for these changes.
Absolutely.
Because just because they need to be change doesn't mean that that's going to translate into changing. So people like them
where there's intention, there is change. And I would say the two that you picked as your example are good examples of change happening. Because Cynthia, Attorney Jennings, had a large part in the shutdown of that landfill.
That landfill, exactly.
Right. And the bill up there at the Capitol currently being shepherded through used to be 5888. It's now a Senate bill. It's 11. I don't know the new number for the Senate bill, but that just happened over the weekend. Came out of committee with unanimous consent. These are things that are almost unspeakable. Now, if it goes through the Senate, that'll be because of the tenacity of Bridget Prince and others that were supporting her effort. And so, yeah, change happens when people's voices are heard and when people advocate for themselves.
Right.
But we have a city of people who, for the large degree, are broken.
Yeah.
And so they feel as though they can't do anything else, that they don't have a voice. And I will attack them. You have two people running with 70 years, combined 70 years of legislative experience, and they have the audacity to want to run to be mayor.
Right.
So I guess as mayor, they will do more than they have in the last 30 years, respectively, apiece. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, everybody got their choice. I mean, you know, whether it's not logical or it's not a good decision, you know, that's the beauty of America. You have free choice and free will to run for public office and, you know,
absolutely
live out your civic duty.
You know, I'm one that everybody should run. I think there should be 100 people running for mayor.
But at some point, it needs to be narrowed down.
It'll be narrowed down by the voters.
By the
voters. The voters narrow it down.
Okay.
That's how it gets narrowed down. The voters do that.
Right. And then, you know, you get to a point, well, who's going to be the Democratic nominee?
And the party will do that.
The party will do that part. And then the general election in November.
And back to the voters. The voters in the party will determine who they want to represent them.
Well, that's also the key. The voters got to vote. I mean, that's the track record of Hartford over decades now.
If three voters vote, then the three people get to decide. If more people want to decide, if they want to vote, they want to exercise their voice, they have to exercise their voice at the poll.
Yeah, but I'm showing that you're really concerned and committed. Obviously, you got to believe in what you're voting for. You know, you can't just say.
Right. I think those are two separate issues. I think they're two separate issues. They're often conflated. But, you know, if voters feel that there's no one worth voting for, then they stay home.
Right.
People came out when Obama was running. They came out in droves. They stood around. It didn't matter whether they was hungry or thirsty. They were proud to stand in line.
Well, if this concept continues that the machine is deciding the election, you know, less than 10,000 registered voters are voting in Hartford every 4 years, and really the machine is kind of dictating who's going to become mayor, you know, that is a problem because 60,000 registered voters, let's say, in the city.
I don't know how much of a problem that is. I think those are nice talking points. I don't know how much of a problem it is. It is... It would be nice if it was different, but at the end of the day, people don't want what's being offered, or they're happy with the way things are.
Right.
And if they're happy with the way things are, why should things change?
Well, it would be nice if parents show up to PTA, PTO meetings in droves, and Board of Education meetings in droves.
They do in some places.
But not all places. And if people feel broken, like their voices don't matter, right?
After a while, they stop trying.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that has been an intentional, desired outcome by people in power. And if folks want to have their voice back, then they need to come out and vote in the Democratic primary, or they need to influence their party representatives on the town committee to move forward a candidate that they want to see in office. This works. The system works.
Right.
You know.
Well, again, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, I think that's the best way to look at it. You know, don't look at it as a major problem. You know, you say that the city is not falling apart. it has serious issues.
And there's serious issues. The city is not prospering like it could for everybody.
Right.
And there are pockets where there are big problems. Those problems can be fixed and resolved if there's some intention, but you have to care enough to want to resolve them. And that's going to take that takes a change in priorities.
Well, I tell you, the economic structure and the housing structure is two real important problems that many, not just city residents, but a lot of people are facing. But clearly in the city, that if housing costs are going up, demand is at an all-time high. You got waiting lists, it's 2,000, 3,000 people for certain affordable housing units. That's just going to crumble in any particular city or any particular part of a city at some point. Because
I don't know that it crumbles the city. I think what it does is it leaves people without homes.
Right.
And that is a problem. But there are only so many buildings in Hartford. There are only so many apartments in Hartford.
Yes.
And at some point, the demand exceeds
the supply. Exactly.
And then you either build more buildings or people, unfortunately, have to find somewhere else to live.
Well, they're building a lot and transforming a lot of apartment units in downtown Hartford. So the latest but if you're going to develop luxury housing, that's not going to be affordable for
there
a lot.
You go. Like I said, so downtown gets developed at the expense of everybody else because those downtown buildings, like 80 million here, 90 million there, 200 million here, another 100 million there. All these things cost money, and they're being supported in part by government money.
Right.
So it's a matter of where the public housing is going to be, or where the public assistance in the development of housing is going to be. So you're going to have the public develop luxury housing for people who can afford to live almost anywhere, or you're going to develop housing for people who really need some housing. And it doesn't mean that you're going to build a project.
Right.
But it means you're going to build housing that people can afford. There's a difference between housing that people can afford and affordable housing. Because affordable housing is housing that there's a scale to what people consider affordable. Housing people can afford is more determined by the individual who needs the help.
Right. Well, I think the bureaucracies and how things are set up, this is a bigger issue. And you're right. I do need to bring a housing expert on at some point to really get in depth with this issue. But if you're going to keep having the Section 8 housing vouchers, and then you say you have a way that people can get to afford to live in a building, but now you got to be on Section 8. You got to only be able to make a certain amount of a certain amount of money. You got to have a long waiting list.
Right, but Section 8 housing. So if you put new buildings downtown, and you can put a percentage of these buildings will be set aside for Section 8 housing. But Section 8 housing has criteria.
It does.
There's got to be a certain number of rooms. There got to be certain sizes. They have to have certain things, and those things aren't in these buildings. So it doesn't matter. You can make half of them available.
Yeah.
But none of them qualify.
Right.
So what do you do now?
Well, what they have done.
So a lot of things have to be put in order. There's a lot of shell game going on here, Jonathan.
Well, that's all I can say is the housing scenario is a big problem. I can't say I know exactly the best way to fix it. I got some suggestions from people and ideas, but right now, I think it's what you just said. The demand is outweighing the supply. You just don't have enough supply housing to meet the demand.
Right.
And that, I don't know how that's going to get changed anytime soon. That is just, when you're hearing 2,000 and 3,000 people on waiting lists, that's a huge demand.
It's a huge demand in a small town like Hartford. Absolutely. Because I don't know where you're going to come up with 2,000 units. I don't know where they come from.
Where they come from, no.
You have to build them. They're not going to pop up out of thin air. Right. You have to build them.
But you can't if you're going to continue to building luxury housing, that's not going to be beneficial to many of the 2,000.
Well, that's true, but are we building luxury housing, or are we trying to save the buildings downtown whose tenants aren't returning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, so until you have a conversation that includes everything that's happening, that's real, that's substantive, and somewhat uncomfortable,
yes,
you're not going to come up with a solution that meets the current issue. All right, because what do you do if the downtown buildings that the corporations aren't coming back to remain empty and their value decreases? And as their value decreases, the grand list decreases, and you have less taxes to pay for the things that you need.
Right.
So there's reason and rationale for all of these things, but if they're not explained and they're happening in a vacuum, people see stuff and they don't know. Which is why one of my priorities is communications and working outside the silos. All of these things happen concurrently. Not just one and then we move to the second. They all happen at the same time.
Right.
So things need to be realigned. But we're running out of time, Jonathan.
All right. Well, appreciate the time. Appreciate the show setup, how we had today. We worked through it.
We made it happen. That's the motto. Make it happen. What do we got to do to make it happen?
That's the key.
And that's the key.
Making something happen.
There we go.
All right.
All right, my friends, our time together has come to an end. This actually is the closing song. So, I didn't recognize it before. I don't know why I didn't. I like the song so much. Toe Dance for a Baby.
That's the name of the song?
That's the name of the song.
Okay.
Jay Hogarth. All right. My friends, we'll see you next time. You have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Jonathan. Great program. Great guest.
All right. Thank you, too.
As
You're welcome.
always.
All right.
All right, my friends, we'll see you next time. You all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.